back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and alongside me are the boys Mac
Good evening.
and Gio.
Yo, yo, yo.
And today we're going to be reviewing some of this weekend's most exciting games that took place in the Premier League and as well in the FA Cup, which we all know had quite a lot of drama. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is at @house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys to get involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. But let's dive straight into some Premier League action, guys. We're going to start off with Southampton 3, Spurs 3. Quite an eventful game with a lot happening during the game, but also, Gio, some things happening after the game. But why don't you walk us through your thoughts of this whole overall situation?
In terms of the game aspect, I think it was just a team that crumbled. They thought they had it in the bag, 3-1 lead. Two-goal lead is definitely a very questionable lead. And people have said, a 3-1 lead is probably one of the worst leads, or a 2-1 lead is probably one of the worst leads you can have. But either way, no lead is safe with Spurs at this point. So for that, hey, 3-1 going into the 76th minute, for most fans and for, the sheer quality of players that Spurs do possess over Southampton, most of us are thinking, all right, that's game. That's game. Most teams will set up, low block, or even just wait for the counter. Nothing too crazy. Just let the ball come to you and, play it as you would. But that wasn't the case. They just, again, what Conte said after the game almost made sense. It's like 11 selfish players that are playing for their own names as opposed to the crest on their jersey. So, yeah, it was quite the downfall. Again, Southampton didn't give up. They had to still put away the chances that were put in front of them. So all credits to Southampton. But that was probably one of the worst. Well, at least this season, one of the worst. Kind of crumbles of the year by Spurs, and it just goes to show how sort of bad it is over there. They're slowly losing their identity. They have great games, and then they have games sort of like this, where are they? How can you consider yourself, a big club in the Premier League, or a team that's constantly in the Champions League for that matter, and go through things like this, and your manager pretty much not believing in the team anymore, questioning the owners, questioning the players. Yeah, so 3-point lead is in shambles, which is good for me, because you guys know how big of a Spurs fan I am. But yeah, it is not good over there.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned they're kind of losing their way, but also, is it kind of? I'm sorry if there's any Spurs fans listening to this, but we're gonna get stuck in basically. Is it kind of the Spurs way to really kind of bottle leads, as sort of Conte mentioned? It is the Tottenham way, and what I mean by that is, it wasn't a bad game. I think Spurs played, especially getting the lead right before half, Mac, through Pedro Porro, one of their January signings. But immediately after the first half, and the start of the second half, Jay Adams equalizes essentially a minute into the second half through an assist by none other than Theo Walcott, who would also get on the score sheet later on in this game. This plus what sort of their downfall in the end, with really 13 minutes left in the game, sort of encapsulate what we have been sort of getting used to seeing from Spurs. What do you think, Mac?
Yes and no, because I'll argue. So the first 76 minutes, this was a tailor-made kind of Conte-style win in terms of how they played in possession, how they were able to press the ball. Especially, I think there's not a better goal to kind of highlight what they were doing well than their first goal through Pedro Porro, where they had both wingbacks very, very tucked in high up the pitch to be able to create width, and you both had Kulusevski who had kind of come on for Charleston earlier on in the game, and Son tight, narrow in the middle to help support Kane. So you had layers players, you had options, you had different abilities to kind of pick and choose your poison of how you want to be able to get out Southampton when they're in possession and create overload situations where there were 2-on-1s for both for Spurs players attacking any of the Saints back four. That really stopped after they got their 3-1 lead. They probably thought, wash their hands, we're done. We have all 3 points. We're going to wrap this up. And at that point, they sat back in a 5-4-1 where Kane, for large sections of it, was 10 yards away from Eric Dyer in terms of how well they were pressing the ball. So it really was more of a switch off. So I don't know. I understand why Conte would be frustrated given how they have played in terms of thus far this season, and not just being the first time where they've surrendered a lead like this. Especially away from home, where they've conceded more away goals since the Premier League restarted following the World Cup break. So they as bad as you get in the Premier League away from home. But it's tough because they do so well at the beginning, it can really let it drop off. And I think it's not really kind of quote unquote maybe the Spurs way. I think even though Conte, I understand where he's coming from, he has a lot to blame with how they played, because that's either the decision to drop off, it's either a manager decision or a player decision. And if it's a player decision, then the manager needs to correct that. That's their job to do, is to organize the team and play in the correct manner. And just 12 months ago, I would argue, this team were doing the complete reverse of what they're doing now. They were coming back from leads. They were out of a European position and were able to have a strong run towards the end of the season to overtake them. And majority of those players are still there. So it's really hard to pinpoint who you should blame. I think overall, you can blame everybody. The question, though, is that going forward, I think reports are, as of right now, is that within the next 24 to 48 hours, he's very likely to lose his job. Probably by mutual decision in some ways. But then going forward, how can Spurs still potentially recover? Because there are good players, there are good aspects of this team. And just like I said, last season, this time, they were flying on all cylinders. So what really has changed since then?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And now we're gonna sort of get into a little bit of what we expect to see in the coming weeks, I guess. Pretty much, I think all around us three here, we don't really expect Conte to play the season out at Spurs. I would be surprised if they do keep him on. I mean, I can't go to my workplace and say, you guys are all bad. I'm the one that's doing the work, pulling around. I mean, you can't expect to do that and still have a job, right? So why would it be the same in this situation? But to your point, Mac, they do have a couple of bright spots. I think the most important part moving forward now is seeing if they can find it's tough to say a long-term appointment at this time, but find someone that can guarantee you or at least help you push for a top 4 position, and then reevaluate from there, because it sounds like, Gio, a lot of things are happening behind the scenes. There's some players that potentially are on the way out. Kane potentially, Son maybe, and if Conte is really not there, I don't see a way those players or the likes of that quality stays with Spurs. What do you think, Gio, and how do you think Spurs should approach this?
I think it's happened throughout these last couple of weeks or a few weeks. I should say, I'd give it over a month where Conte has come out and kind of criticized the players and the club on or even like self blamed himself, kind of throw himself under the bus. And saying maybe I'm not the right guy for the job because I'm not getting the best out of the players, and we're struggling to win and compete with the big boys, and even think about competing for a trophy. So like I said, in the last podcast, or maybe it was a couple podcasts ago, I think he's almost self-sabotaging himself, where he's able to get the boot, still get paid out by it, and leave this club and possibly go back to Italy. But no, I think obviously it starts from upper management, and it's kind of like this is the time where they have to make an example that we can't have anybody constantly disrespecting the club anymore. After the first time, it was already kind of shocking, but for him to go off on a tangent like this and throw every single person and everything about the club under the bus, then I think they need to step in and really sort of make an example out of this. How they're going to progress is one thing, because look at it this way: history kind of repeats itself. Jose Mourinho called out everything and everyone at Manchester United. Did they fix anything? Not necessarily. They found a better coach and provided him with the funds to buy certain players. So maybe it's a wake up call for the owners to do so as well. Find the right coach for the system, let them buy who they need to buy, and make it a project. Maybe that will help. And maybe the first domino is Antonio Conte. And how are they going to fund this rebuild? By selling Harry Kane, by selling Son. So in retrospect, if they handle this correctly, this can turn around and be a very successful turnaround for Spurs. But again, John Levy has turned away a lot of money for Kane before. So realistically, he's already lost a little bit of money on that. I think the best case scenario is them letting go of those players early and this summer, make the most that you can off of them and start the rebuild with a new manager.
Mac, similar thoughts to Gio there. I know we kind of talked about it a little bit when Conte was appointed. I'm not sure if I'm now putting words in your mouth, but you were kind of confused as to, they're bringing this manager. He's going to spend a lot of money for players that are ready to win now. But what's next if he doesn't achieve that, which we're kind of seeing this now. So what do you think, Mac? What are your thoughts?
I think Gio is mostly spot on in terms of what they should do. In terms of Son is 30, turning 31. Kane is 29, turning 30. So your arguably two best offensive players, they're going on the wrong side of 30 fairly shortly. And smart clubs have the ideas that players that are over 30, we want to not have for long-term contracts because year over year, your results are going to drop off. So they theoretically, I could see, considering how much Manchester United paid for Antony last summer, would they ask for the exact same amount, at the very least, for Kane today? In all likelihood, would Manchester United probably pay that? Probably. And that would be great business for them. So I could easily see them getting their way out. The question is, what's next? Because I don't see, there isn't to use their North London rivals, there isn't a Martinelli on the wings. There isn't a Saka on the wings waiting to come on that you think that, there's a youth player here that I could see a lot of promise in their team right now. I would say their best young player, arguably, I'm looking at the team, is Kulusevski. And if everybody else is gone, why would he still be there? Because I don't think he's necessarily the player that you, to use a basketball term, build your franchise around. He isn't your main player, I would argue. He's still young. He can still very much improve. In this game against Southampton, I thought he had great moments, but he really needs that somebody else to be able to link off and work off with what he does with Son, what he does with Kane. So I could easily see those players leaving, Hugo Lloris out the door. It just really... It's tough where I don't see, if we do such a quick transition, are they going to really have like a gap year next year, kind of like Chelsea's doing this year, and in previous years, I think maybe the last year under Mourinho, where it's like, hey, we're going to wash our hands this year. It's not going to be the greatest. We're going to give ourselves good 3 full transfer windows this summer, next January, and the summer after that to have a full reset. We ship out these players and bring new ones in. There's so many variables there that it's tough to really project of what they will do. But I think Gio, like I said, is spot on of what they should do, because you can still get really good value from some of these bigger name players. And it does start with the top down in terms of how this team is run. If you look at any success through any sports franchise in every league across every sport, it's from the ownership down of how successful you can be and what type of process you can implement to make a successful team. It just doesn't happen out of random. So I think Daniel Levy probably has to look himself in the mirror a lot, because he's really kind of the spearhead of this. I do want to touch on Southampton. I know we've gone long in terms of Spurs here. This is a fantastic result for Southampton. In terms of, we want to pat ourselves on the back, I feel like a lot of time for how we feel like Spurs probably not going to play that well and could shit the bed potentially. But we've also counted out Southampton so far this year and arguably all agreed that they will probably be going down. Very well could still happen, but right now, they're 2 points out of the relegation spot, and they have a matchup against West Ham. If they pull out a win against West Ham, they're out of relegation zone in all likelihood. So they're still on a full shout to potentially stay in the Premier League. Even though, again, I think I would agree, I still want them to go down. But overall, this type of performance was phenomenal from them, and they've been playing better, especially under new management. So you've got to give them full credit there and see if they can continue some sort of revival for the rest of the season.
Yeah, great point. Only 4 points separating all the teams between 12th and 20th at the moment. So it's going to be a very fun end to the season for all these teams involved. But let's move on now to, I guess, another team that's involved in that sort of 12th to 20th place, Everton. They were away at Chelsea.
I thought you were going to say Chelsea
and
was in the 12 to 20 range. I'll be honest with you. I thought that's where you're going.
they're not too far off, Mac. They are definitely not too far off. They did though play out a 2-2 draw with Chelsea and Everton. Very interesting to see sort of the names and the score sheets. I know Joe, you're gonna definitely have something to talk about in terms of the Everton goal scorers towards the end of the game. But Chelsea, off the back of a couple of decent results, looked like this would be a favorable matchup at home to get maybe some of their misfiring strikers Mac going. Joe Felix and Havertz did get on the score sheet for Chelsea, but they did concede, I would say, 2 goals that could have been avoided. So overall, I guess, is this a decent result for Chelsea, or is it a missed opportunity overall? What do you think?
Gio, sorry, you're going to jump in there?
Oh,
I thought you was referring to my apologies, Ray. Were you bringing it to Giro and me because I heard both. In terms of this,
Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
My apologies. So in terms of this result here, I do think it's a missed opportunity in terms of how well Chelsea, they did play decently well enough on the front foot in terms of being able to create opportunities going against an Everton team that has been on the rise. I think Pickford played a great part in this game. He was very decisive in net, and even though Chelsea had a lot of the ball, Everton, even though Chelsea did have a lot of the ball in terms of creating opportunities, they somewhat seemed comfortable to me in a lot of ways where they knew exactly how they wanted to press. I would argue, just as you mentioned, in terms of Chelsea could be a little bit disappointed in terms of the manner in which they scored. I think Everton, same way there. They could have easily walked away with all 3 points if James Tarkowski didn't kind of make that challenge, which led to, of course, Joao Felix, who had probably his best game since joining Chelsea on loan, is that they could have walked away with all 3 points. I think in terms of what Chelsea do need to do, they really still haven't sorted out how they kind of they want to be able to manage in terms of offense versus defense. What I mean by that is that when they're going very aggressive in terms of trying to be able to get players into the box, it does expose them very much on the counter, as well as when you're looking at isolated defenders, if they don't have the support, they can be exposed. Koulibaly in the final goal against Sim, where Sim scores for Everton, he did the best impression of Connor Cody a couple weeks ago, I think it was, that we saw. That's as close as you can really get, and Kepa didn't kind of crown himself with glory in the moment at the same time. But so as many positives you want to take from Chelsea, they do just enough horrible things where you want to be able to negate them. So it's really tough to be able to kind of judge them in terms of where they're going to go for the rest of the season. I think Graham Potter very much still has he's on the hot seat. Maybe he's lifted one butt cheek, but the other butt cheek is still squarely steaming right now, in my opinion. But just to quickly also talk about Everton, they're playing very, very well. Sean Dyche has settled in, and in terms of their goal scored, he's really converted the team to exactly what he needs to do. Defensively, they're pressing correctly. In terms of their scoring ways that they score their goals, they're doing it just as Burnley would have done in previous years under Sean Dyche. 4 of their 7 goals have been from set pieces situations. 2 corners, 1 free kick, 1 penalty. Only Arsenal, Brentford have more in the same time period. So it's stereotypical Sean Dyche, and with that type of defensive mindset and bagging in kind of those types of goals, you can see the team slowly climbing the standings. And as long as they keep going forward, I think that they might be in a position where they won't need to worry. And this might make Gio happy. Their next team that they're facing in the Premier League is Tottenham, so it's probably an easy dub for them now.
Ooh, that is going to be a fun match, because obviously we don't know what Everton is going to come with, but we don't know what type of Spurs team will show up. But going back to this game, Gio, Chelsea 2, Everton 2, can you walk us through sort of what happened in that second Everton goal, tying it up for Everton in the end with that Sims, I guess, walk past Koulibaly? Because it looked like Koulibaly was just relaxing. I thought maybe he thought the game was over. I don't know. What happened there, Gio?
Look, I think Mac touched on, all the key points of the game, but yeah, I think that's the key talking point, because we talked about them. we talk about Sims in particular when he got the start. I think it was against Liverpool, and
Right,
we
right.
saw the chances that a more well-rounded striker or a more Premier League ready striker would take on, especially against a Liverpool side that was constantly struggling, especially the back line. Joe Gomez, in particular. But yeah, the way the way he kind of turned, and put it on his left foot, and I think Koulibaly really wasn't expecting it, and the way he was really able to body Koulibaly, which we know is a strong guy. So the way he just did it was so perfect, and it's clear and it's pretty evident that one, he's been working on his game, and Sean Dice has been backing him. He's been giving him the confidence that he needs because a striker that still isn't informed and still kind of scared to make those moves wouldn't make that move. Koulibaly is a constant starter for one. He was a very constant starter for Napoli. He's always on the team sheet for Chelsea. He's one of the mainstays for his national team. He's a good defender, and for him to do that only goes to show what Sean Dyche is really doing for Everton and doing for the confidence of these younger players. So all credits to Sims. Great goal, and then of course Kepa probably should have done better, but for him to even get the shot off and to put that much power behind it, all credits to him.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I agree. I agree. Koulibaly hasn't been the season that he would have wanted. His first season at Chelsea, coming in for quite a big price tag in the summer. And man, I don't want to bash on him because I know Koulibaly has quality, but this just shows you how good Thiago Silva is still at this age that he's at, and the quality of play that he puts in, week out. Yeah, unfortunately, Koulibaly, that was just not the play that he would have envisioned. But credit to Sims, quick touches to get around him, and decent finisher all around. So yeah, tie game, Everton Chelsea, definitely something to keep us wondering about if Chelsea did get the win, how this would have really continued their run of form. But just to close out this part, one of my favorite moments of this game was when Tarkowski hit Joao Felix with a clothesline. I'm not sure if you guys saw. That was a very fun moment of mine. And also the penalty celebration from Havertz after scoring on Pickford. I think there may have been some words exchanged previous to the penalty, and so with that new rule, Mac, you said that they're looking to introduce sort of the no trash talking for goalies. Maybe we won't see that Martinez rule. But yeah, guys, let's take a quick break here, and then we'll be back with some more Premier League football to talk about. So stay with us. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are going to continue our podcast with some more Premier League action to talk about, and we obviously got to cover the title challenge, which saw Arsenal win 4-1 at home to Crystal Palace. As we mentioned in our last podcast, Vieira could have came home to help Arteta, get a win, but psych, he got sacked before the game could even happen, which means he couldn't really throw that match for Crystal Palace. But hey, Crystal Palace were there for the taking anyways, and Arsenal really put in a class performance back overall. How did you see the game?
I thought it was very interesting. First, in regards to the Vieira piece, I want to be able to get that on front. The fact that they fired him before this game, for me, was a little bit surprising, given the fact that, at least defensively, this year, they have been very, very strong. I can pretty much guarantee you right now, if Vieira was managing that game, Arsenal don't score 4 goals. This Crystal Palace team in the Premier League this season have only conceded 4 goals twice, and that was against both Man City and Tottenham. And thus far, defensively this year, they have been, in terms of the calendar year of 2023, that's been the one thing that they've been really, really good at, where they've understood their assignments, they've understood in terms of, okay, how do we want to be able to defend certain set pieces, how do we want to be able to defend teams, and see if we could potentially hit them on the counter. They haven't been prolific enough in front of the net. That's probably been the area of concern. So I feel like at this extra game here, him coming home to manage against Arsenal, I feel like is a little bit of poor taste in terms of letting him go there. Just to be able to hit that on the front. Overall, though, in this game, aside from the first 5 minutes when Zaha struck the post and went off the back of Ramsdale, could have easily gone into the net, a la Jorginho and Martinez from a couple weeks back, that could have easily have happened and the game would, of course, change. Aside from that moment, this was Arsenal games through and through. They played some quality football overall, and they're a team right now kind of in full form. I think in terms of their attacking threats, everybody played very, very well. I don't think there's a single negative to come out of this game. The tough part, of course, even for them, is that theoretically going into this game, you're missing Saliba and Tomiyasu, and Rob Holding came in and played a great shift, and Ben White looked phenomenal at wide back. So in terms of any questions they had going in, they really successfully answered them. But the tough part is, it's like, how much do you want to be able to draw from this game, considering they're playing at Crystal Palace team, as I said, have been a very poor run of form. So overall, really all positives for this Arsenal team.
Yeah, you mentioned it. The way they've been performing the last couple of games, and it's definitely been evident the balance in the team, even with new players coming in. You said Rob Holding obviously made a contribution to this game, but even just going forward, the way Martinelli gets on his goal, a lot of the attack coming down the right-hand side for Arsenal with Saka, obviously, I think you can definitely argue the best player and the most potent attacker this season. Hidden being able to isolate players there and then draw defenders over. And then you have the quality of Martinelli, who puts the ball in the back of the net, making it look easy. I think now his 12th goal this season in the Premier League, and just shows the great season he's been having. My shout, if the EPL had this award, the most improved player of the year, maybe a little bit of bias because I didn't think he was that great last season. Towards the end, maybe better, but definitely has been a big jump in this year's Premier League, and has been obviously a ever present player for this Arsenal team. But Gio, how impressed were you with this Arsenal team, even without some of the regular players that normally start?
Extremely impressed. Look, they took it in stride. They really took it in stride. Obviously, the early Zaha chance that could have gone either way. Him cutting back in, getting off the post. Some teams kind of bend and break at that point. They start getting nervous. They start passing the ball poorly. In their zone, they kind of like give the ball away. But that wasn't Arsenal in any sense of the word. They were class. They were finding every seam. Whether it was the early chance, the early goal by Martinelli, the ball to Saka for him to turn, great cross across the box. Very, very well composed by Martinelli, and then even that Granit Xhaka chance where I think it was Zinchenko who cut inside and then found the seam through him with that through ball. Hey, they were hitting on all cylinders, really. They gave up a goal, but in hindsight, it's really not that bad. Again, not the regular guys. A little bit of fatigue, even from playing so many games back to back. Hey, it happens, but to win in such dominating fashion, I think is a great look for them, and it should be a huge confidence boost that even without their mainstay guys, that they're more dominant than ever in this league right now.
Yeah, and now with that win, they are now 8 points ahead of Manchester City, Mac, with a game more played. But as you mentioned, Mac, Arsenal with this win, really now 8 points, even though they do have a game played above the City, puts them in the driver's seat for this title challenge, with City, still have the Champions League, still have cup games, which we'll touch on later in this podcast. But yeah, how do you see Arsenal's challenge from now to the end of the season?
They're definitely in a stronger position, in my opinion. At odds-on, probably should be the favorite. They have a tougher schedule going down the rest of the season, something I talked about in our previous podcast. But they only have this one competition. In all reality, they play 28 games. There's 10 games remaining. They have 10 cup finals. That's how they really have to look at it, game after game after game. And the next team they play is against a Leeds team that's kind of looking to be able to pick. They just had a great win themselves, but this thus far this season have leaked goals, so they can be in a position again where they can theoretically have a comfortable performance against a quote unquote weaker team. The interesting part though will be for me is that continued health, of course, being away on international break, because how they've been very successful this year is because everybody on the pitch really is it a threat to get on the score sheet or theoretically to be able to put a cross in for somebody to be able to finish. Martinelli, Saka, Odegaard, and whoever's kind of isolated or been a striker for them, if it's Jesus, Trossard, or Nketiah, has been a threat. There's a lot of plaudits. I think this comparison might be a little bit unfair, but as well as Rashford played this thus far this season in the Premier League, he has 14 goals. Martinelli has 13. Saka has 12. So how well we've talked about and played, and how much he's changed for Manchester United. Similarly, Arsenal have multiple options that are doing almost and arguably not more of a threat given how they play. So I think this team for the Premier League, how they played thus far this year is really as complete as can be. It's really in those bigger matches and down the stretch of the season, are they going to perform to the levels they've done thus far this year? So they're in a position to pick up a very big trophy and really kind of accelerate the process that Mikel Arteta talks about a lot. Very much trust the process, a la 76ers from back in the day, but they've accelerated and now they're in a position to challenge for something that they didn't, if you asked them at the beginning of the year, that they might have been, this is a little bit out of reach.
Yeah, I mean it's within reach now, so definitely something to push towards. But just to wrap up this part of the podcast, Gio, on the flip side, Crystal Palace, haven't had the greatest of the season, or the season that they really were hoping for. Now Patrick Vieira is no longer the manager, and so there are questions about what they're going to do from this point out. They are currently 12th in the Premier League, 3 points away from 18th in the relegation zone. But the quality that they have, they shouldn't really find themselves there. And so a question to you, Gio, obviously if they had maybe the likes of Conor Gallagher, this season would have been different, but they don't. So how do you think Crystal Palace should approach the rest of the season? I don't think they're really going to be bothered by the relegation battle, but it's something that they should still, I guess, keep an eye out for. What do you think for the players that they have? Like the Zahas, Olise, and Eze. They have quality. How do you see the rest of their season going?
I think they still need to, apart from how their season will go, I think we need to see that they still are competing at a very high level. I think, look, even if things don't work out at Crystal Palace, they still need to retain their value as a player. So teams are obviously going to look to how players react to these types of situations. Is he type of a player who's going to fold and just piss and moan about it all week in week out, or is he actually going to go out there and still try to compete for a team that obviously puts their trust in him, and he wants to win, whether it's whether they're 19th on the table or whether they're 4th on the table, they're going to go out there and compete. So that's one. And two, I think rumors are confirmed that Roy Hodgson will be back at Crystal Palace, which is something. Don't know if that's the route to go to. Maybe they should have just put maybe an assistant there, as more of an interim role, so they can figure out what they want to do. Say come summertime, so a new manager steps in, and again, the new manager has his own plan to see what type of players they bring in. But it's tough. Of course, Hodgson is very familiar with that place, and even some of the players. So maybe he can get the best out of them, or just enough out of them that finish a couple of spots higher, and sort of give upper management an insight of what they really need. At the end of the day, Roy Hodgson is older, but does garner a lot of experience in the Prem and football in general. So that type of insight isn't always a bad thing. So yeah, I think they're not in the worst situation, but it'll be very easy for them to improve, I think.
Yeah, no disrespect, but older is an understatement, I would say. But hey, he has quality. But Mac, you had some thoughts as well for this appointment?
Yeah, the reports for Hodgson is that it would be until the end of this season. It would just be as an interim until the end of the season because he's familiar with the club. He managed them. I think it's not last year. I think the year before, if I remember correctly. So he knows a lot of the players that are there and helped bring in many of them. And so, and then of course during the summer, look, hopefully if they were able to stay up, reset there. In terms of how they should play going forward, I don't understand it. Some people on this team, Edouard and Mateta, how they continue to get minutes is shocking to me. It's very simple. Obviously, I'm going to understand that Vieira and a lot of people there, Crystal Palace, probably know more about football than I ever will. But it seems very simple to me is that you're strong defensively, 4-3, and play Eze, Zaha, Olise, and just play on the counter and let madness happen. It's not that, for me, it's not that difficult because that lineup, theoretically, because they shift in Eze or Olise on one wing or playing Eze sometimes as a 10 and leave Zaha isolated on the wing. I understand the ability for him to be able to take people on and either have an opportunity to score for himself, which he can be prolific, or give it to somebody else. The problem is any striker that they've given it to is trash. And IU starting even on the right wing instead of Elise is trash. I apologize. It's just how it is. It's not that difficult for me. I feel like they have a clear path to play successful football because even in the midfield, I understand Slamby Lakonga couldn't play in this game. Him decently enough playing as an 8 with Decore and Schlop. Defensively enough, are going to give you the business. And the back four are very, very good. The problem is they just can't score. And for some reason, they continue to play people that continue to miss clear chances. So I feel like that's a small tweak that they should make. But what do I know? I feel like that's, if I manage them, it's very clear and simple of how we can progress. And given what they need for the rest of the season, they're defensively going to be good enough. It's just that they don't need to score 4 or 5 goals. They just need 2, and they'll win the majority of the games.
Fair. I take your point, Mac, but obviously now Roy Hodgson is in talks to become the manager. So if he does, best of luck to him. Let's take a last break here, guys, and then we'll be back covering some of the FA Cup action that you guys are all waiting for. So stay with us. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are just going to finish off the podcast for today, reviewing the FA Cup action from this weekend. And very, very controversial, filled with a lot of action, especially in terms of cards being handed out. I'm always a fan of that. Gio, Man U won 3-1 against Fulham in their FA Cup quarterfinals. A game that could have gone, I guess, a different way than it ultimately did. Fulham did take the lead through Mitrovic and had a couple of chances thereafter, but hey, that penalty awarded for Manchester United, I think correctly given a red card for Willian, essentially saving the shot on the goal line, and then a couple of red cards that were handed out really changed the game. What did you think about that overall, Gio, if you could sum that up for us?
Madness. I think is the word for it. I think madness more so what transpired after the initial handball. But honestly, Fulham looked like the more threatening team for a large majority of the game. And even prior to that counterattack, it looked like the buildup was coming for Fulham to even score a second and to go 2 up. And to go 2 up. So, obviously, corner, counterattack, Anthony gets the ball. Great through ball to Sancho. Sancho, great feet, shots off. William comes through and saves it with his hand. And initially, he's claiming that his hand was close to is tight to his body, so he really couldn't do anything about it. But after further review, it's still given as a handball to save the net, save the goal. So obviously, as we know, that's an automatic red card. Fair enough. That is the right call. I think that is the right call. And even if they do score, it's a 1-1 game. You're down to 10 men. You sit in a low block, defend. Best case scenario, you hit them on a counter or you take his penalties. We know how bad David De Gea is on penalties. So what is there to worry about, right? We be professional, we be level-headed. But you're forgetting Mitrovic is not level-headed. So obviously he goes into the ref and there's definitely contact there. aggressive contact, as a lot of people see. And starts obviously kind of tearing them a new one, as did Silva, their manager. Probably said something, not to the liking of the referee, and he instantly receives a straight red, actually, not even a yellow, straight red. So, I mean, I'm curious to see, read the reports to see what he had actually said, to get that type of reaction from the referee. But yeah, three red cards in say 60 seconds. They threw it away, and I think there's really one person to blame here. Some will argue, whether or not, Silva acted a certain way, Mitrovic would have acted the same way. But it's what happens after is how can a manager discipline a player for overreacting and not thinking about the team first if he did the same thing? So, how does that talk go? And judging from the post match interviews and things of that nature, um, Silva doesn't feel any remorse about what he did and what happened and transpired about him getting the red card. Yes, he can still see him being right, but as a manager, you have to be more level headed. You know, yes, you see the red card happening, you should expect the red card to come as you saw what happened. How are we going to change the team? How are we going to change the formation to continue to progress in this game? Not only did he not do that, he put his team in jeopardy, got himself a red card, and then obviously Mitrovic following. So, yeah, I think Fulham definitely shot themselves in the foot. It'll be interesting to see how many games Mitrovic gets in terms of a ban, which I do think is coming. But yeah, no, Man U definitely got away with this one. So hopefully their next performances are much better than this, and not having to rely on like an incident like this.
Yeah, definitely an incident that not just changes the how the game's going, because as you already mentioned, Fulham looked like they were on the ascendancy, could have gone 2 or 3 up maybe, but hey, having 2 men down, 11 against 9, the game is pretty much wrapped at that point, and so just very unfortunate for Fulham that really maybe a couple minutes between the penalty being awarded and being taken, a lot really went wrong for them. What was your take on this, Mac?
So it felt like the first 70 minutes, I think when we're talking about this last podcast, I really thought Fulham could create a whole lot of problems for Manchester United defense, where for the first 70 minutes, they were the better team. And I would say, aside from David De Gea, the game could have been 3-0, maybe even 2-0 at that point, and would have been wrapped up at that. And Willian maybe doesn't make that type of challenge to be able to stop the ball going to the back of his net. I think overall, every single call was correct in terms of Willian getting a red card. It's unfortunate for him. You feel tough for him because you can see what he's trying to do, and you can see him even try to move his hand away. The tough part is that it still did hit it. And given that situation, I completely understand the call. I understand why Mitrovic would be upset at the same time, and he definitely voiced his displeasure. And of course, any contact with the referee like that should be a straight red. My more so problem, and I think I was talking about it with Ray, we've had examples just fairly recently where that's not given. If you scroll back the page and go for Manchester United against Liverpool, where Bruno moves the linesman, the assistant referee, out of his way, forcibly so, and you can see he's frustrated. That's not reviewed. That's not given anything. So it's more about the consistency of this. That's more so, I guess, where I have more of a problem with it. If we're going to agree, and I think it's fairly, that no contact with the referee at any point is okay and should be a red, it should be consistent through. And I think that very much, because there has been a whole lot of teams this year, I would say more so maybe than ever, aggressively coming at referees, where you'll not just see the captain, which is what it should be, you'll see 4, 5, 6, 7 players on every single call, because it coming to be able to make an argument, because there is now the delay of VAR, where people are going to kind of voice their frustrations and try to get a word in. So I think, unfortunately, these situations are more likely to going to continue happening, but it should be consistent across the board. However, once those 2 red cards do happen, Manchester United could easily kind of fumble the bag at that point. Let's say if the penalty was missed, they did have the resolve to not just take a 2-1 lead, to take a 3-1 lead. So you got to give them credit there, is that they saw an opportunity. Yes, Fulham did shoot themselves in the foot quite a bit, but they still had to close out the game in the next 20 minutes theoretically. Otherwise, the longer they don't score that second goal, the more and more pressure they theoretically be under, and more I would feel like individually they might start trying to do too much to be able to kind of create that breakaway. So they did do well enough to really quickly wrap it up. I think it was in the 78th minute, 77th minute, my apologies. So literally 2 minutes later after the pen, they score their second goal. So full credit to them to be able to make that adjustment and to be able to take advantage, because they've now set themselves up to still have a very exciting towards the end of the season, because for the first 70 minutes of this game, it looked like it was, in the FA Cup at the very least, it was slipping away.
Yeah, and now we know they are through to the semifinals. We'll quickly talk about, we'll mention the sort of matchups after we cover the next game. But yeah, could have gone a different way, but now Gio still on for the FA Cup, still within it for the Europa League, and so still going, and with the international break coming at, I guess, very much like you, Mac, mentioned, international break coming at a positive time for some teams where they could get some time to reevaluate, maybe some rest for some players, some key players at that. What do you think is sort of the next approach for Man U, Gio?
It's just, I think this break couldn't come at a better time. They were kind of heading towards a more, they started to look a little bit more rough. That sort of confidence, you could tell, kind of dipped a little ever since Casemiro got his red card. It just isn't quite the same in terms of feeling confidence on the ball. I think the boys need a rest, and this is a perfect time for that. Especially for Rashford, who against Betis had already picked up a knock, and then for him to pick up another knock here against Fulham, I think his body needs rest. So, hey, it's important. So I'm glad they got it. I'm glad he gets it, and he obviously didn't get called up for England because of these injuries. So yeah, no, I think it comes at a great time. They just need to rest their bodies, because what Ten Hag does is he doesn't really switch up the lineup all that much. He trusts the guys that he trusts, and that's very fair. You want the confidence, you want to have all the confidence in the world in the guys you put out there. So those players need some rests. And, no, I'm very happy, and then obviously Eriksen, hopefully he progresses well with his injury and is able to come back sooner and start training with the guys again.
Yeah, so that's definitely something positive for Man U. But now moving on to a team that really doesn't, I guess, knocks here and there don't really affect it as much. Manchester City, they hosted Burnley, and on Vincent Kompany's return to the Etihad, held 6 against his old team. Haaland with a hat trick, Mac, Alvarez with 2 himself, and even Cole Palmer getting in with goals. Just quickly, just wanted to mention to you guys, we're amateur football players, and so we think we're great, but in reality, we're amateur players. I want to point out, Manchester City are obviously, if not one of the few, the very best team in the world. They made Burnley look, and Burnley being you can say, the best team in the second division, look pretty ordinary, and at times look very, very below par with sort of their defending. So just wanted to point that out. But Haaland, again, Mac, a hat trick even before being taken off, not even finishing the full game. His run of form, and I hate to bring it back. Kevin De Bruyne putting in another performance. Alvarez, couple goals. Phil Foden with his involvement as well. Things are clicking for Man City. What do you think, Mac?
Yeah, this very much seems like the lethal run that we've been talking about for Man City, is that they're a team that has that switch where they can now run off, theoretically, 4 or 5 games of absolutely shellacking teams. In 2 games combined, they've scored 13 goals, if my math is adding correctly. But it's absolutely obscene. I think if you would argue, in terms of even these last 2 games, Haaland has more goals than any Chelsea player has this entire season in 2 games. It's obscene what this team is doing overall, and the scary part is they, in a lot of ways, are just going to keep getting better. They have a lot of young players. This is Alvarez's first season. Phil Foden's kind of getting into his run of form. Haaland's still doing what he does. KDB is just slowly coming back. It's quite scary to see in terms of what they can do down the stretch for the season. The top part for them is going to be that management, where they're still in the FA Cup, they're still in the Champions League, and of course they have the Premier League going. So they're one of the few teams that are in heavy fixtures where they look at themselves, we need to win all three, right? Yes, we want to win the Champions League most, that's 1A, but 1B, 1C are almost just as important to them, and they see themselves as they're a generational team with generational talent where they're able to kind of pull off a treble. That's what they're looking at. That's the only thing that they're thinking of, is that every game, every third day, they're coming in to win. But that's much tougher than some of the other teams who are prioritized just one competition. I think, though, on Burnley's side, Vincent Kompany had the absolute correct approach. He, in his post-match interview, was like, I let the boys know in terms of this is the standard we'll have to play to. If we're going to be coming out to the Premier League, this is what we need to be able to do. And in all reality, yes, they're first in the Championship, but they're 21st in the English league, top leagues, if you were to put them out. So are we surprised if Man City does this against Southampton, against Everton, against one of those bottom teams in the Premier League? No. But this is very much an understanding of, like, they want to, yes, play expansive, aggressive football, very much what Burnley haven't done over the last couple of years. Against high-quality teams like this, you're going to get carved out. And there's way too many situations where there was 3-on-3s, 4-on-4s going at that Burnley back line, and it was a matter of time before they concede, and it can just be a snowball effect. So it's very much a great learning experience from a team that we all know is going to be coming up back to the Premier League. So they have a lot to learn, but at the same time, like I said, it really just shows what City can do when they're hitting their peak form. And I would argue they're still not even there yet, which is scary.
Yeah, definitely something a sight to behold. Gio, one of your favorite names for players, Bailey Peacock Farrell, held 6 against the City team, but I mean, you can't really fault him. The golfing class is just that different, and like Mac really mentioned, those games coming back to back now, even Cole Palmer getting involved with scoring, Alvarez getting a couple of goals here, it's going to be very, very important for them to continue pushing as they are going for, the Premier League, FA Cup, and Champions League. So Gio, and how do you see Man City approaching this really busy set schedule with all these competitions coming all at once?
I don't think they're worried, to be honest. I think this was just almost like a friendly. It just really showed like the way they were able to simply just put it out wide and have the player dribble into the box. It was almost copy and paste for a lot of these goals, and they just simply couldn't stop it. So I don't think a matchup like this really took much out of them. And to be quite frank with you, I don't think the draw that they received, I don't think that matchup will take a lot out of them. I don't think they'll, I don't want to be cocky or anything. If they face Man U or Brighton in the final, I think that would be a matchup that will get a little bit more out of that. But in terms of Sheffield, I'm to be quite frank, I don't think that's going to be much out of it. So I don't think they're just really seeing these games as, even players that don't get much play time. Pep loves to do this and rotate those guys in and still really put on a show for the fans. So I think their main focus still is the Champions League, still is the Premier League, to try to close that gap as much as possible. I think they have a pretty good chance at the Champions League as well. And like Holland said, he wasn't brought in to necessarily win the Premier League. They've done it for the last 5 years, and he's really here to win the Champions League. So I think their main focus is actually the Premier League. Pep won't admit it, but I think he in his mind has the Premier League as an afterthought, as he really wants to win the Champions League with Man City. And as he should, because that's really the last thing he needs to check off his list before, whether he decides to stay with Man City or, move on to another chapter of it in his career.
Yeah, definitely. And so we'll definitely keep an eye out on sort of their matchup. You talked about it, Gio, facing Sheffield United in the next stage, which is going to be in approximately a month's time from the time of recording, April 22nd. I think, Mac, it's fair to say that City should be favorites for that game. Man U Brighton, though, might be different. Brighton have been performing quite well in the Premier League this season, and so they might be very similar to Fulham, I would say. Another tough matchup for Man U, but that really gives us the matchup, if all things go as we expect, Man City, Man U for the FA Cup final. And what, I guess, better way to sort of cap it all off with than seeing these two teams at the height of their powers? I would say Man U are getting back to it, battling it off for that title, especially after that result between Man City and Man U earlier in the season. I think Man City will be looking to get revenge, but hey, who knows? It's a cup final. How do you see this draw potentially affecting that?
So I would love a Man City Man U final. Here's the reason why. I want you guys to go on a journey with me. Okay, so let's assume Man City make the Champions League final. Let's just assume that. Okay, and in all likelihood, I think this might be a little bit of an overreach. Let's assume Man City do get past Sheffield United and make the FA Cup final. The FA Cup final is June 3rd. The Champions League final is June 10th. There's 7 days difference. So if I am Gio, a Manchester United fan, my game plan going into that FA Cup final, if Man City are playing their best players, is not to win the game, is to hurt their best players. So they miss the Champions League final and prevents Man City getting the final Infinity Stone, Pep getting the final chip that he needs. I think that's the chaos that any Manchester United fan is praying for. It's like, we just want to get Brighton. We don't care if we win the FA Cup. That's great. I don't care. What they do want to win is I want a boxing match. Then, Ray, you'll bet the over on the cards. We all know this is what happens.
Sure.
But for me, I see that matchup. That's a foregone conclusion. I'll be honest. Sorry, any Sheffield fans out there. But the Brighton Man U game, that's very interesting. That could theoretically go in many different directions, to be completely honest. And even if Brighton do make it through, theoretically, there's interesting subplots about potentially linkage between any Brighton players going to Man City, theoretically. But the big juicy one is if Man U either can stop Man City getting a treble potentially if they are in the Champions League final and potentially the Premier League, or if they want to play spoiler in terms of getting kind of the last dig in before Man City ends up potentially playing in the Champions League final. So that's more what I'm looking for, and I think that would be very fun and exciting.
Yep.
Yeah, let me add something. God willing, if Man City, does happen to make the Champions League final, that would mean that it'd have to beat Real Madrid, which would hurt me. But if they were to make the final, hope is against Napoli. So if we can get Osimhen on a deal, then yeah, let's go out there and tackle, boys. I know Casemiro, he's already got 2 red cards. What's a third one? What is a third one at this point? Bruno's definitely itching for a red card himself, so we can make it happen. But we're gonna need Osimhen on a deal. So Napoli, if you're listening, make the final, and we can make it work. You imagine that season for Napoli, bro, the Scudetto and the Champions League final. Oh, come on, that would be fantastic for them.
That would be definitely fantastic for them. But even just looking at this potential matchup, Man City at that point could have won the Premier League, could have the Champions League to play, and might be in the final for the FA Cup. On the flip side, Man U won the EFL Cup, could be in the final, I think, of the Europa League, which would be played a couple of days before the FA Cup final, and could also be on the treble, potentially. So both teams could potentially be taking a treble away from their rivals. So, hey, very, very juicy final matchup that could be, and we'll just have to keep an eye out for that. But guys, this concludes our podcast for today. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. Our handle is at @houseof_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email, houseoffooty@hotmail.com is our email, and the next time you hear from us will be Friday when we bring you some special content. So be on the lookout for that. On that note, thank you, Mac.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, Gio.
Peace out, guys.
And guys for listening.